In the following tutorials on item management, we will review adding items from the database to a room and adding new items to the database itself. We will also look at the various options and configurations that can be set up for items to help describe and comment on them. However, the various methods of actually adding comments and descriptions to items are covered in other videos and are not reviewed here. So to begin, let's add a new main item to a room. This is done by clicking on the plus button to the right of the main item bar. The form which has popped up is referred to as the Select Item form, and it is used extensively throughout the software, whenever in fact you need to select items, which could be to add the items in question to a room, as we are now, or to apply a particular setting to them. Down the left-hand side of the form are category filters, and along the top are letter filters, both of which are conveniences used to narrow the field of selectable items in the main palette. We will touch on category filters later, but for now we will use the letter filters and the scroll bar to the right to find and select any items. The database of items, which is automatically installed along with the iAssist software, is extensive and comprehensive, and it is unlikely that you will need to add new items which aren't in the database. However, for those occasions where you might want to add a new item or configure certain item settings, we will follow through the process of setting up an entirely hypothetical item, called New Item, and configuring all the relevant item options. Once I've explained the various uses of the options available, we'll end by looking at a couple of more realistic examples of usage, which illustrate the techniques we've covered in the video. So to start with, let's suppose that we're looking to add another item to this lounge. If we cannot locate the item we wish to use in this Select Item form, it is not in the database. However, adding a new item to the database is as easy as clicking on this plus button at the bottom of the Select Item form. On doing so, this Item Details form is launched. In almost every case, you will enter the same information into the two fields entitled Item Name and Display. For a standard item like Cupboard, the entries would both just be Cupboard. And in this case, as the system tells you, we didn't really look too hard in the Select Item form, because an item called Cupboard already exists. So let's just add an item called New Item to demonstrate. Any image in a JPEG format can be imported as a visual representation of the item, which will not be shown on the report, but will be a visual aid to you in selecting the item. In this case, we'll just import a question mark image. Note that an image imported to this palette will always be displayed next to the item in the Select Item form, as you can see, and once it has been added to the room, it will also be displayed in the top main menu bar of the item description form, until and unless it is replaced by an actual photograph of the specific item being described in the report. See videos related to assigning photographs for more on this. Having double-clicked on the blank palette, navigate to the folder where the JPEG image is held, highlight the image you want, and click Open. Having just created a new item, iAssist now automatically prompts you to associate the item in question with any relevant item type or damage type vocabulary menus, which would make the contents of those menus available for selection whenever the new item is selected for editing in the item description form. For the time being, we'll associate this item with certain sets of damage type terms, which we will see in use in a moment, but we will not link it to any item types. To add our new item to the room we were editing in the report and return to the item description form, let's tick the item and select OK. So here our new item has been added, with the description field highlighted, ready for us to begin entering a description for the item. To rearrange the order in which any main item at the top will appear within a room on the report, just click on it and drag. Once a new item has been added to the database, it will obviously have no specifically associated items or descriptions, other than those that were chosen immediately after creating the item on the pop-up form. For instance, there are no ready phrases or pop-up phrases listed in the left-hand panel. For a review of phrases and pop-up phrases and how to add them, please view the videos related to describing items. Of course, the standard group term menus are still available as ever, for example, the contents of the condition menu below. And the general list of all damage terms are here. These linked damage sets, water, paint and hard surface damage, were selected immediately after the item was created when we were prompted, and so naturally they are displayed within the Linked Damages tab of the Damage Type menu. Please note that these are merely groups of damage terms selected as particularly likely to apply to the item in question, but if you use these group term menus, you may prefer to stick to using the All Damages tab with the letter filters displayed a moment ago. Now let's briefly look at the Item Type menu. As you may have expected, because we have not associated any specific item types with this item yet, no related item type terms appear in this menu while the new item is selected for editing. Note that the two menus just viewed, the Linked Damage and Item Types, are the only menus in the list of group term menus at the bottom of this item description form that hold content which is specifically filtered to be relevant to the item being described. The contents of all other group term menus do not vary depending on the actual item selected for editing. As no items will have been linked to the new item as yet, on clicking Add Sub-Item, there are no linked items displayed in this form. You can of course always add items not shown in this form as sub-items by clicking on the Add Other Items button here, which brings up the Select Item form. I'll now proceed to select some entirely random sub-items to add to our new item. Once I've finished selecting any sub-items from the Select Item form, as you see, a prompt pops up, unless it's been disabled by choice, asking me whether I'd like to add the additional items to the list of linked items, in other words, to a list of items that will appear on this Select Linked Items form for easier selection in future. Let's choose Yes. Here are the items just added as sub-items of our new item, and because we opted to add them to the linked item list too, the next time we click on the Add Sub-Items button to add some sub-items for our new item, the items we just chose will be presented for rapid selection in the Select Linked Items form. To demonstrate, they are both listed here as linked to the main item selected. Now we've looked at the various options that have been set up for our new item, and the means of adding sub-items when no items have as yet been linked to the new item in the settings. Let's go to the Item Manager in the settings to see about configuring the item options a little bit more. You can access the settings either from the main menu, on the first screen seen after logging into iAssist Inventories, or by clicking on this cog icon in the various forms where it is displayed, as it is at the bottom of this Property Overview form. As you can see, the settings has many tabs, but the only tab for configuring item options is the Item Manager, which conveniently enough is the first tab highlighted when entering the settings after clicking on the cog icon. When the Items Filter button at the top is selected, as it is automatically on entering the Item Manager, all the items in the entire database are listed in this left-hand column, unless of course a letter filter has been applied at the top. If a letter filter has been selected, the filter button to the right will automatically appear as selected. You will note that you can also display the full list of rooms by clicking here. However, there is a separate video dedicated to the management of rooms, and for our present purposes we will return to the item filter. All the other palettes shown on this form display various options that are configured for whichever item is currently selected in the left-hand column. However, before looking at the options available for configuring our new item, I'd like to point out that you can also add new items to the database here in the Item Manager. If you recall, I added the currently selected new item by clicking the plus button at the bottom of the Select Item form. Clicking this plus button brings up the same item detail form as before, and of course the item details are added in the same way as they were for the last new item. As this item was just added to illustrate how to add items using the Item Manager, we won't configure these options. The name of any item selected in the left-hand column can be edited by clicking on the pencil icon here. And of course any item can be deleted entirely by clicking the X icon here. Now let's configure some options for the new item. You'll know that there are basically 4 types of option available, one for each palette to the right of the item list. The linked items, linked categories, linked item types, and linked damage types. Let's begin by configuring the list of linked items. This feature has been included to ensure that sub-items can be added to the item description form with the greatest possible ease and speed. If you chose to add a sub-item to the item selected on the left, then any items shown in this linked items list would be displayed for selection in the Select Linked Item form, which pops up on clicking Add Sub-Item. So essentially, this linked item list is just a short list of suggested sub-items which appear when the item highlighted on the left is selected in the item description form and you click the Add Sub-Item button. Earlier, I added some random sub-items, alarm panel and alarm sensor, to the new item by clicking the Add Additional Item button, which is at the bottom of the Select Linked Items form. I was then prompted by the software to choose if I wanted to have those items automatically added to the Select Linked Item form for quick selection in future, and I chose Yes. As you see, when these items were added to the Select Linked Item form, this list in the Item Manager was also updated to include them. To add linked items using this Item Manager form, select the item in question, click on the Add Linked Item button below, and select some further items from the Select Item form. Please note that the items we've just added as linked items may have linked items of their own. If we wish to see which items are currently linked with any of these items, we can click on this drop-down arrow next to the item in question. We can also link items to a linked item by highlighting the linked item in question and clicking on the link button again. This could also be achieved by highlighting the selected item in the main list on the left, alarm sensor in this case, and adding linked items to it from there. Having set up some random linked items here, some of which have linked items themselves, let's return to the item description form to demonstrate using them to add some sub-items. Earlier, we added the 2 sub-items alarm sensor and alarm panel seen above. Now let's add some more sub-items. Note that the items shown in the settings as linked to the new item are all displayed in this linked item list as potential sub-items. Now let's add the sub-item door. This time we'll add some sub-items to the door, which is itself a sub-item of the new item, and at the same time another sub-item directly to the new item. We select any sub-items for the main item from the upper list. As we've only linked alarm panel and alarm sensor, add another alarm panel item. and we can select some of the items linked to the door from the lower list. Finally, I'll add an item not on the list above, which can always be done on the odd occasion the sub-item you're looking for is not available. This time I'll assume I just want it once, and I will not add the additional item to the list of linked items for the door. Note that both the items selected from the linked items associated with the door and the item chosen by clicking on the Add Additional Items button have been added as sub-items of the door, which was the item selected when we clicked Add Sub-Items. In contrast, the alarm panel, which was an item added from the items linked to the main item, has been shown as another sub-item of the main item. The difference is shown by the degree of indentation from the margin. As usual, if I require to reorder any sub-items of the item selected, I can do so by clicking here. To delete any item or sub-item, I can highlight it and click on the X button at the top of the column. The next option for configuration is the categories. Categories are merely useful ways of filtering items for selection from the Select Item form when you wish to perform an action, such as adding items to a room or associating a ready phrase with multiple items. For example, if we tick the Bathroom Items category while we have the new item highlighted to the left, if we return to the item description form and add the new item to the room, then on selecting the Bathroom Items category, our new item remains in the palette for selection. To edit the categories available and configure which items belong to a particular category, click on the Edit Categories button here. The list of categories that currently exist are displayed in the left-hand column, and the complete item set in the database is shown on the right. The items shown as ticked are included in whichever category is highlighted on the left. New categories can easily be added. Existing category names can be edited, and of course categories can be deleted. Note that deleting a category will not delete the items within that category from the database, but will remove that particular category as an available filter. Obviously, to remove any item from a category, untick it. And add any item to a category by ticking it. I'll select a few random items to associate with Category 1 now. Note that Category 1 is now shown in the list of categories, and if I now select the item Aerial, the tick box next to Category 1 is checked to indicate that Aerial is one of the items included in Category 1. It is also possible to associate any item selected with the given category at any time by ticking the checkbox next to the category. This is useful if you wish to add just one or two items to a category, but if you wish to associate several items with a category, you will find it more efficient to click on the Edit Categories button, highlight the category in question, and tick the various items as I did just a moment ago. Now I'll add all the items contained in Category 1 to a room at once. Note that I can use the Select All button at the bottom to quickly select all the items still visible in the palette. This is very useful if you wish to add every item in a category, but can also be used if there are many items and you wish to add most of them. It then becomes an exercise in unticking the few you don't wish to select, rather than ticking all the items you do wish to select. All the rather random items selected have been duly entered as main items. To conclude this section on categories, they are essentially just convenient item filters that can be customized and are most useful if you are looking to add either quite a few items at once, or if you are looking to assign a ready phrase or a pop-up phrase to quite a few items at once. As mentioned previously, please watch the video on using categories to assign phrases to multiple items if you wish to see an example of this. Linked item types are straightforward. It is often useful to have a list of relevant item types or other item-specific vocabulary available for entry when describing a particular item. The item types you see here each represent a menu of particular item type terms. The contents of any item type list which has been ticked will appear for selection from the item type's vocabulary menu in the item description form, even when the item currently selected on the left is selected for editing in the item description form. You can see and edit the contents of each item type set. As usual, you can add new menus and then populate the menu contents. Once this menu has been populated, it can be associated with a particular item. In this case, as our new item is selected, if we tick the new item type menu, it will be associated with our new item. And now if we view an example of our new item in the item description form, we can see that on clicking on the group term menu for item type, the contents of the new item type menu are displayed. In fact, any number of item type menus can be related to a given item by ticking them, but in nearly all cases only one menu of types will in fact be relevant to any given item. To conclude this review of item types, this function is useful because it ensures that the contents of the item type menu can be made strictly relevant to the items being described at the time. For an inexperienced clerk, this menu will also be particularly useful in helping them get to know and use the correct terminology for items. Also, as the contents of this menu will be related to the particular item being described, you could, in a sense, treat it as an extension of the ready phrases palette and add any item-specific terms you wish to be available for quick selection that perhaps don't quite make the grade for being associated as a ready phrase here, so you know they are available for quick selection whenever the item in question is selected for editing. For example, under the cupboard item type, we could add the word partition, which isn't a cupboard type, but might frequently be used in describing or commenting on a cupboard. Finally, let's review the damage types. Linked damage types are very similar to linked item types in that they are displayed in a particular menu for selection within the item description form when the item they have been associated with is selected for editing. However, unlike item types, the menus are not likely to relate to one item only but many, and conversely, the item may be usefully linked to various damage type sets. When I first created this new item, I was prompted to select which, if any, particular damage type menus I wish to associate the item with, and you'll note that the ones I selected then are ticked. Let's change the selection by adding a couple more. And now let's briefly see where the terms in these menus can be entered from in the item description form whenever we are editing this new item. Note that there are two tabs under the damage menus, one which displays all registered damage vocabulary with a letter filter at the top, as is currently shown, and the other which displays the sets of linked damage types we have associated with the item in question. Note that you could change which tab is displayed first on clicking the damage menu button below by selecting the tab you wish to set as the default and clicking here. As my personal preference is merely to use the All Damages menu with the letter filters, I will reset it as the default tab. Now that we've reviewed each configuration option for any item, I will briefly give some specific examples of application, which will also demonstrate the potential use of entering differing item and display names for the same item. The ability to assign both a standard name and a display name is particularly of use in relation to setting up new rooms, but it can also be applied to items as follows. Suppose that although we already have an item in the database called cupboard, we want to be more sophisticated and create an item called kitchen cupboard and associate it with setting options more relevant to the kitchen in particular than the settings configured for the general cupboard item at the moment. However, at the same time, we want the kitchen cupboard to appear on the report just as cupboard. The contents of the field item name will be the name of the item displayed in the select item form and here in the item manager, and this name must be unique. Therefore, we would add the new name kitchen cupboard here. On the other hand, the contents of the display field will be the text shown on the property overview and item description form, i.e. the text shown on the forms which are seen when describing the item that has already been added to a specific room, and it will also be the item name entered in the produced report, so we will merely add the text cupboard here. As shown previously, you may add an icon image by double-clicking on this palette and navigating to a folder where you have imported or downloaded a suitable image. However, the image does not need to be unique for each item, and as you can see, an item does not strictly need an image to exist. The image is merely an aesthetic consideration to help you rapidly spot the item when adding it to be described. Here's where we can begin to select the item configuration options. If we don't wish to do so, we can just click OK without selecting anything. However, here we may as well select cupboard types as the item type, and select some damages that we may anticipate will frequently apply to a kitchen cupboard. As a damage category entitled Kitchen Damage has previously been created with a list of damages that are frequently caused in the kitchen environment, let's choose that one. And some others that may apply to cupboards, which usually have hard surfaces, and are often made of wood, and are sometimes painted. That will do. Now we can select some linked items that are likely to be described as part of a cupboard, but also items that are specifically likely to be stored in the kitchen cupboard. To begin with, let's select two separate cupboard parts which may be described as sub-items of a cupboard, door and shelf. And now let's link some kitchen-related contents. To do this, it will be most efficient to just link some items created already to contain groups of kitchen-related paraphernalia. Note that it is not only possible but useful to create items which are in effect not specific items but item groups. In this case, we just linked 3 examples of this to the kitchen cupboard. Such groups are created in exactly the same way as you might set up a specific item, and the items within the group are linked to the group item as sub-items, as we shall see shortly. You can see the items just linked in the list above, and if you wish to see any of the items already linked to the linked items, just click the drop-down arrow. Now let's link this kitchen cupboard item to the kitchen items category, so that if we filter the Select Item form by kitchen items, it will be available for selection. We have not created any linked item types specific to kitchen cupboards in particular, and you may recall that we just linked the kitchen cupboard to cupboard types in general when they came up. Finally, note that the damages types we selected when the kitchen cupboard item was first created are ticked in the Link Damages Type palette to the bottom right. Now let's put this item to use. First of all, as we have linked the item kitchen cupboard to the kitchen items filter, let's use this functionality by clicking the kitchen items filter to the left. There are many kitchen items, so to narrow it down further, let's apply letter filter as well. Note that the two kinds of filter, category filters and letter filters, can be used in conjunction. Here's our item kitchen cupboard. Now before starting on the descriptions and comments, let's quickly add any sub-items we wish to describe separately. These should be added to the item description form in the order that you select them. Please note that even though we are adding a kitchenware group inside the cupboard, a kitchenware group could still be added elsewhere in the kitchen. Now let's add some actual sub-items to this kitchenware group. As you can see, it was quick and easy to add the necessary items as they were all presented for selection in the linked item list. Now let's start by describing the cupboard's general characteristics. To do this, we will use a pop-up phrase. The use of these is explained in detail in the videos relating to item descriptions and comments. Please note that the menu item type has been included in the pop-up phrase structure, and because the kitchen cupboard was linked with cupboard types, the cupboard type wanted is displayed here for selection. Finally, we'll briefly look at setting up an item which is really a group of items. This is very much the same as setting up a standard item, where the linked items will be the item set that make up the group. I will briefly set up a kitchen furniture group, which shall be displayed just as furniture on the report. At this point it is worth noting that as we are setting up a group item which will contain items, there is no sense in associating it with a particular item type or damage type, as these only really apply to specific items. Therefore, I will tick OK without selecting any values from this Select Item Descriptions form. Now to link the various items under the group. And to finish, we can associate this group with the category kitchen items so that it can be found on the Select Item form when the kitchen items category filter is applied. That concludes these tutorials on item management. I hope you have found them useful. Thank you for watching.